Welcome back indeed. We've got Jesse and Matt Arnold, Terry Barber here having a good conversation. I wanted to say that it's the Institute of the John Paul II Institute in the Vatican that John Paul II was instrumental in getting that set up. And a couple years ago, the pontificate of Francis decided to get rid of it. And Janet Smith was on it and all these good people. And we were wondering, why would you get rid of something that's so important? Well, I kind of see now the direction we're going in, that now that makes sense why they did that. But Jesse, before I get to Matt, I want to ask you, Jess, the question on this book, and I mean, I deleted my files on it because I don't want anybody to ever see it because it's that bad. I don't want to participate in someone's sin by that. It was very difficult for me to actually speak about this yesterday and even today when, let's be honest, we've got the gospel of Jesus Christ, a saving power of him. But I think the reason that we're pointing this out is really about souls, isn't it, Jess and Matt? That we don't want souls to be misled. Is that not a fair statement, Jesse?
Yeah, as Catholics,
yeah.
There's a term that we use. It's called custody of the eye.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and there's also another term that Father Ripperger uses all the time. It's called custody of the mind. Mm-hmm. And that's why St. Paul's always talking about do not be conformed to the spirit of this age, mm-hmm. but be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Makes sense.
This book is part of the spirit of this age.
Exactly.
And the spirit of this age is the homosexual lobby. Yeah. And that's what Fernandez is pushing, the zeitgeist, the mm-hmm. spirit of this age. And the Bible tells us to put on the mind of Christ, to take all your thoughts captive to Jesus Christ. Trust me, if you read this man's book, you're not going to be inspired to go to Holy Mass or do a holy hour or pick up your rosary.
Right.
It's going to transport your mind, thoughts, memory, and imagination into other places. That's all I have to say.
Yep. Well said. Matthew, what your thoughts before I talk about Father Malachi Martin? Go ahead.
Just real quick, I looked at those materials, obviously, before we went on the air to comment on them yesterday.
Yeah,
I did too. I read them.
I couldn't bring myself to read the whole thing.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it. Yeah, like I said yesterday, not only was I in danger of losing my breakfast, but it's bad for you.
Yeah,
I don't need that in my head.
Yeah,
I don't need to carry that around with me.
Yeah,
yeah. And the thing I wanted to a couple of things just real quickly. Number one, don't shoot the messenger.
Right.
This isn't calumny because, calumny is a sin when you tell the truth about somebody to somebody who doesn't have the right to know.
Right.
Listeners of this program have the right to know.
Absolutely.
We're not airing dirty laundry.
No. Public book.
Yeah. And it's trying to give people, to an understanding, but there is a scandal, and our good Lord said, it must needs be that scandals come, but woe to that man by whom they cometh. Okay, well, if it's not us, if we're not the source of this scandal, then, we need to pray for those who are.
Yes. Well said. And Jesse, I know I've talked to you, and I think even Matthew, I talked to you about my dealings with Father Malachi Martin back in the 1980s.
I want to hear him.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was just, it's the 1980s. I'm in my 20s. Okay. And he's calling me up because he knew that I was doing, media through St. Joseph Communications. And, mm-hmm. I heard him tell me personally what he saw. And, I read, he sent me some of his books. I read some of his books. I was like, wow, this is incredible that this is true. Well, I was close to Father Joseph Fessio and Father Ken Baker. They're both Jesuit priests and they're knowledgeable and guys. And I had respect for them. And I asked him, I said, what do you think of Father Malachi Martin? And they said, well, he'd have to be a fly on the wall because the way he describes everything is so detailed. I don't think you can trust him. But you know what, Jesse and Matt? And I'll tell my audience right now, he was spot on. He talked about all this stuff to me in the 1980s. And I just kind of went, I don't know why he kept calling me. He wanted me to publish his stuff. I guess that might have been the reason.
I suspect that's what's going on.
Yeah, but he was real friendly, and I just had, hour and a half long conversations with this man on a regular basis. And he intrigued me because I thought, if he's right, we've got problems. And this was something that, as a young man, I couldn't grasp my mind around this because of the consequences that we have. But now, 40 years later, I'm looking back and going, wow, he was spot on, Jess. Matthew, I think he was right.
Yeah, it's you're too young at that point. That's what we call an inconvenient truth. And I went through the same thing that you did.
Okay.
When people would tell me things about there was a satanic mass and this cardinal was involved in the 60s, and I would put it off because it was so inconvenient to embrace that. And I was, again, just starting my own journey of faith, my own interior conversion.
Sure.
To me, that was a huge impediment.
Yeah.
So I chose to purposefully not listen to things like Michael Davies, Father Malachi Martin, and many others that I could name, which now I've reread in the last 10 or 15 years. And I'm saying,
Dr. Mara,
wow,
he's another one.
Dr. Mara,
William Mara.
I'm saying, wow, these guys were absolutely spot on. I stand corrected, but I didn't have the sophistication to apprehend that information at that time in my life, as I was growing in my interior life.
And Matthew, as a convert, what's your perspective on that?
I recall.
Here comes.
I don't like to name names, but the good folks over at Catholic Treasures, you remember those
Tom
guys?
Zola, baby, good friend of mine.
I'm looking for there wasn't a lot of Catholic bookstores and stuff that actually had books in them at that time.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's one of the places I wound up, and they're a little to the right of Attila the Hun over there. they got a framed picture of Malachi Martin, and I was encouraged to get a copy of Windswept House. And again, I had that same reaction back then that I had to Carlo Fernandez's work now. I couldn't read it. I got through, that first description of this stuff that was allegedly happening in the Vatican. This is awful.
Yep.
And I was like, what a terrible, scandalous thing for this man to do this. And I remember after, Vigano and all this stuff came out about McCarrick, I said to my wife, I said, you know what? I owe Malachi Martin an apology.
Unbelievable. Jesse, wrapping up the solution with us hoi polloi guys. We're not management. We're in sales.
Okay.
What can we do for the Holy Mother?
Here's my opinion as to the solution.
Yeah.
Right now, we live in a very peculiar time in church history because right now we have the ability to access information immediately.
Yeah, never had that.
But think about this. Think about this. We've had bad popes before.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, Dr. Krasnowski, in this article I read last week, he names 21 bad popes, 21. And he tells you exactly either what they said or who they were sleeping with, A or B. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but for example, let's just say that, under Pope Alexander, when he had a bunch of kids running around the papal throne, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have iPhones, and we didn't have the ability to say, hey, Terry, Matt, did you know Pope Alexander's got a bunch of kids that he sired? They're in the vat. We didn't know that. So most people, let's just be honest, didn't even know who the Pope was. Mm-hmm. For most of history, you lived in France, you lived in Italy, you lived in Mexico, you lived in Brazil. You know what you did? You just worked on your interior life. You tried to become holy according to your state in life, and you focus your life around Jesus, the Mass, the sacraments, the devotions. You didn't know who the prefect of the CDF, or back then the Holy Office was, or the Pope, or what he said, or what he wrote, or who was sleeping with who. You didn't know any of those things. Most Catholics, up until the age of the internet, they kept their life very micro. They focused on their own personal holiness, their own interior life, the salvation of their family, like Joshua 24:15 is, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Sure. They kept things simple. It revolved around the parish. It revolved around helping out in catechism. It revolved helping in corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Yeah, we've got to go back to the micro, because when we get too fixated on the macro, this cardinal's doing this, this bishop's doing that, the Pope said this, you can go crazy. And what that is, that's a blueprint to leave the church. Yeah. That's what happened to Jerry Matitix. That's what happened, to so many other people, Steve Skojek. I could give you Rod Dreher, I think. Yeah. The list goes on. When you start focusing on all the filth in the church, you have some good minds that end up leaving the church because their minds cannot embrace how this can be happening in the one true church of Jesus Christ. And I don't want to pull a Jerry Matitix and some of these other guys that I can mention. I want to stay anchored with the Holy Mother Church, and I want to get to heaven. And I need to work more on my interior life than worried about this Fernandez's 2 books that he wrote.
Well said, Jesse. Matthew. Hey.
Well, you put your finger on it. That's the tragedy that I see, and you put your finger right on it, is that there are people, good people, who are throwing their hands up because they're so frustrated because in the psychology they call it cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Your mind can't hold a contradiction without resolving it. It'll drive you insane. Right. And so people are resolving this kind of, it's like there's heresy and there's schism. And why can't people see it? And the weird thing, though, is that the solution is to become a heretic or a schismatic.
Exactly.
Which is like, it's really important to make sense. That's that's why I called my show No Nonsense Catholic, because I'm just trying to make sense.
Yes.
And that is the intellectual linchpin of my conversions, that Catholicism makes sense. It is the only really comprehensive and cohesive worldview. It's the only one there is. It's the only way to approach life that answers all the big questions.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, why are people trying to rearrange the deck chairs on this? I mean, it's like you've got the bark of Peter, let it sail.
Amen. Well, you get me all excited, gentlemen. You're spot on. And Matthew, how can people listen to your show? Where is it up in the lineup?
Yeah, that's right. We have a new lineup here on DMPR in the 10 o'clock slot. We have all our weekly programs. So I'm on Monday in the rocking chair between Jesus 911 and Terry and Jesse show. Great place to be on Mondays. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, it's Bishop Strickland. And then Thursday, Dr. Sandoval. And Friday, Bible with the Barbers.
Awesome. Jess Romero, what state should we be living in, brother?
Last time I checked, let's live in a state of sanctifying grace. Don't live in a state of mortal sin. Become holy or die trying. Forget about that BA, MA, PhD. Work on the ST before your name.
Amen.